This video will contain horror imagery, sound effects, and an overall unsettling atmosphere. However, no jumpscares will be played. Viewer discretion is still advised. Fear is the most primitive and powerful emotion that humans have, which quite ironically has long ago been transformed into a form of entertainment. Therefore, it's extremely interesting how its respective genre of entertainment horror gets represented in the media. For example, while watching, reading, or listening to stories or scenarios meant to invoke fright or stress, you are set as a secondary or tertiary character in said story, very seldom coming in direct contact with its elements. However, when it comes to portraying horror in a highly interactive environment where the player can directly control some of the events in the story, such as games, this rhetoric gets completely flipped on its head. In contrast to conventional media like books and movies, you most of the time get to control the main character, make decisions for them, and face the consequences for the mistakes you have made. There is a myriad of great games that take advantage of this exceedingly well, but one of them stood out to me and many other people more than the most, adding a completely new twist on elements and gameplay mechanics while playing off of a fear that most players never knew they had. Five Nights at Freddy's, FNaF for short, arguably revolutionized the genre. But how exactly did this happen? As always, welcome to Cold Brew, and let's get into it. When FNaF was released in early August of 2014, it almost instantly became a huge hit among players. What exactly caused this? To find out, we must first go way back. Our story begins with a now well-known name, Scott Cawthon. Early in his life and later in his career, he made Christian animations and low-budget games that barely got any traction. Although one of his more prominent titles, The Desolate Hope, got a bit more recognition and even got a small following, it was nowhere near to make ends meet on its own. One of arguably the most important games of his making was Chipper & Sons Lumber Co., a lumber tycoon run by a family of anthropomorphic animals. Although this title got a lot of negative feedback, the main complaints from players were the character designs. A lot of them complained that characters looked very reminiscent of uncanny animatronic dolls rather than cute animals. This sent Scott in a spiraling depression. While initially discouraged, almost to the point of quitting game development entirely, he eventually decided to use the robotic character flaws to his advantage, sparking the development of Five Nights at Freddy's. If you've never heard of this game yet, I'll give you a quick rundown. I'll try to keep lore out of it, or else would be here all evening. You sign up for a week job as a night guard at a popular pizza place chain. You get seated in a cramped, dimly lit office and given a camera feed to watch over the dark corridors of the restaurant. The halls, void of children's laughter, now and again echo only the sounds of the ventilation systems, and the animatronic mascots are resting peacefully on the stage. Seems like it would be easy money, right? Well, things get a little bit more complicated once you find out that the animatronic animals are sentient and seem to be eagerly moving towards you through the hallways of the building. You, as the player, cannot move at all and are tied to the tiny office. Suddenly, you are put from a position of an overseer to that of a prey. There's only one way to keep track of the rapidly moving robotic characters: your flimsy old camera monitor. Even then, the animatronics are most of the time barely visible in dark holes and rooms, making it sort of difficult to keep track of them efficiently. Furthermore, you have a limited amount of energy you can use up. By overactively using the cameras and, more importantly, keeping the doors shut, you will drain your power extremely fast, eventually resulting in a building-wide power down and an almost guaranteed game over. To finish a night, you must survive for an entire 6 in-game hours, 5 nights in a row, with the animatronics moving more and more aggressively with every shift. This makes for a definite nightmare scenario. There are, however, some other innovative ways of keeping track of the Metal Menaces. Whenever Freddy, one of the animatronics, moves into another room, he gives off a ghostly, almost human-like giggle. This, unlike a lot of audio cues in the game, is a definite indicator of an event happening in the game. However, sometimes ambient sounds go off randomly, such as long, piercing drones, which can throw off your concentration from trying to spot out useful or otherwise informative audio from the monotone hum of your office's fan, or mask them up entirely. Imagine this. You're panning back and forth on your camera feed, trying to pinpoint the exact locations of the animatronics around the building, almost in a dead, unsettling silence, when suddenly really makes your heart skip a beat, doesn't it? Truth is, these sounds are completely random and have no correspondence to the in-game events, but certainly feel like it. This creates a constant lack of information, and thus preventing planning, further aided by sounds like this that act as clutter or red herrings to try to mislead you about the current situation. Sporting 4 different animatronics with different AIs, it's paramount to know that the game is practically working against you and to adapt your strategy to every possible turn of events. Scott gave new life to his flawed character design capabilities by making the game's characters purposefully unsettling. His design falls into something called the visual uncanny valley, which means that they seem humanoid but look, move, or behave a tad different than a human would. This plays on the player's natural reactions of repulsion or discomfort. Below their seemingly friendly outer suits, a cold, horrifying endoskeleton can be seen. This is further reinforced by how we don't even get to see the animatronics move for 90% of the game. The player can spot them standing still in the camera feeds, sometimes looking straight into the camera, as if they know you're there. They are portrayed as an attempt on child-friendly entertainment machines, but are just ever so slightly human-like and unnaturally large for us to perceive them as a threat. Your equipment is old, rusty, and looks and feels unreliable, as evidenced by multiple spare monitors and rivers of wires on your desk, and the cameras droning in agony as they pan back and forth. As I said earlier, the sound design in FNaF is immaculate. YouTuber Scruffy has a great video on it, so be sure to check it out. Speaking of cameras, the one stationed in the kitchen is completely malfunctioning. Only an audio output can be accessed, making you hear from the pots and pans crashing about when an animatronic is inside. Furthermore, the game is set in a children's pizzeria complex, and with the fact that the otherwise friendly, but still ever so slightly unsettling animatronics are sentient and deadly, it creates a truly oxymoronic situation, evoking an aggressive atmosphere of borderline panic and pure dread. As I stated before, this is pure nightmare material. This creates a sensation of an otherwise normal scenario, but with something being very, very off. The only other human character we come in contact with comes in the form of a disembodied voice in several pre-recorded voice messages you receive at the beginning of every night. The man, appropriately dubbed Phone Guy, apparently worked at your position before and tries to give you some background information. The only thing is, he doesn't provide you with nearly enough to fully feel at ease in your place, and constantly tries to weave around the idea that the sentient, murderous robots are trying to get you. He calls them quirky and only mentions some tips on how to deal with them in the worst case scenarios, like closing the door when an animatronic is outside your office. If you thought this was bad, the usefulness of the tips he gives you degrades as the nights progress. Less and less information is given to you through to night 6, where Phone Guy ultimately meets his demise, possibly by one of the animatronics. This leaves you in a so-called information vacuum, which forces you to react to situations unraveling on the spot and hinders you from planning all that much. There are many factors you're just not aware of that will need finding out, either by seeing patterns corresponding to you and the animatronic's behavior, or by letting them kill you until you learn. Five Nights at Freddy's is arguably the most important title in horror of the 2010s. Its creator experimented with past failures and turned his weaknesses into a selling point. By plucking the player's core fears, the game does a fantastic job at both introducing brand new scenarios and mechanics. It puts the player in an extremely vulnerable position and lets them know it very well. FNaF creates an amazingly tense, claustrophobic, and overall intensely unsettling atmosphere by utilizing both the lack of information and the consequential sense of panic. All of these aided by genially horrifying character designs. Although there have been further installments in the series that are arguably equally as good, the first FNaF game will always be a title of immense importance. This simple, yet incredibly complex game had managed to change horror forever. Thank you for watching. Until next time.